You think when you die you go to heaven? You come to us!
Phantasm II stars James LeGros, Reggie Bannister, and is directed by Don Coscarelli. What is up, guys? It's time to review Phantasm II. It's been quite a while since I did the first one. I am doing every one of these movies in the series along with Cody Leach. We're both going to release separate reviews at the exact same time. So as soon as you get done with this review, click on this card right here and go check out Cody's review. Cody is, I guess, a veteran of these movies, whereas this is my first time watching any of these. So I saw the first one, I kind of dug it. Now what do I think of the second one? Here we go. So first off, quick plot synopsis. This one takes place actually quite a few years after the first one. They send our main character Mike to the mental ward because obviously they think he's crazy after the events of the first movie. So then he pretty much lies and says that, you know, all of this was a figment of his imagination so he can get out of the mental ward. And then he goes and finds Reggie, and they are on the hunt to track down the tall man. And if you notice, this plot is a lot more, I guess, understandable and linear than the first movie, and I guess that was on purpose. Let's talk about the backstory of Phantasm II first. After Don Coscarelli did the first movie, he never planned on doing a second one. He made that movie for like a tenth of the budget of this movie, which was like $3 million. Universal wanted to do a sequel to the first one. Originally he did The Beastmaster, which is a good film actually. I grew up watching that film with Mark Singer and the ever so lovely Tanya Roberts. And so eventually he came back, you know, there was more of a story to tell, and plus at the end of the first movie, the tall man wins. Boy! That never gets old. So really this one is more of a road trip type of film. You know, they spend a lot of the movie traveling from place to place. They come to this one small town where the tall man, he's holed up, he takes over this mausoleum, and there's one shot where they come to this like grave site, and you see like all these graves just completely dug up. Really cool shot. And if we're familiar with the first movie, we know that the tall man, he came to Earth so he could harvest dead corpses and turn them into slaves for his own planet. Outside of that, who knows what the hell he's doing. That's the one thing about the Phantasm series. It's definitely the most like what the hell series out of all other franchises, I think. And that's on purpose. Don Coscarelli wrote this story for those with more of an imagination, you know. Maybe we won't tell you everything about the tall man, give you his whole backstory. So that way, when you leave this, then you kind of form your own conclusions. Even some of the plot points don't make sense. And like I said, that's on purpose. The thing that you must know about the second one is that it is much more accessible, it's bigger, and I think it's better. You know, you take what Terminator 2 was to Terminator, that's what Phantasm 2 is to Phantasm. Now also, before I get into what I really liked about this one, it's interesting to note that Michael Baldwin did not return for this movie. He wanted to return for this movie, but Universal wanted Don Coscarelli to get more, I guess, trained actors because Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister did not do any acting between the first movie and the second movie. They pretty much went on with their lives. Reggie Bannister actually worked at a freaking mortuary, if you can believe that. But the deal was made and Don Coscarelli was able to at least get Reggie Bannister. And what I hear is that Michael Baldwin still to this day has a huge chip on his shoulder about Phantasm II. This movie was like the proverbial salt in the wound for Michael Baldwin. But I have a feeling that this is the best of the bunch. Because this one really gives you everything you would want in a Phantasm movie, but it also gives you a lot of the stuff that just us horror fans crave. You know, some great blood and guts, some nice action along the way, some really awesome characters, which I'm going to get into in just a second. And then a really cryptic villain, the tall man. First off, let's talk about those characters. I love the characters in this movie actually, even though many of them come from the first movie. First off, let's talk about the character Michael. Brad Pitt actually tried out for this role. Did not get the role, obviously. it went to James LeGros, who went on to be quite the established actor in other TV shows and movies. But he was actually really good in this, you know? And the yawning scene, I think, is the most honest scene out of the whole movie. I mean, look at this. That's a real yawn. But as far as like a leading man goes, you know, he's pretty damn good in this. He's a badass. And just a sidestep, that's one thing I do like about the Phantasm series. It doesn't really rely on like a final girl, you know? It's a final guy movie, I guess. And which leads me to Reggie Bannister, who plays Reggie.
Who knew that a freaking mofo with a skullet could be so badass?
You know, he just owns this role. Even though he comes off as silly in some of the scenes, he follows through, you know? There's a saying in the Marines, when you're wrong, stay wrong. And he stays wrong until he's right. And that makes no sense. But Reggie is a full-on badass. He's got like a quadruple barrel shotgun in this movie, so he can kick twice the ass and take twice the names. You got an awesome chainsaw fight in the third act of the movie. And yeah, Reggie, he's a badass. You can't help but love the guy. And you can tell that Reggie Bannister freaking loves this role. And there's some interesting girls in this movie too. First off, Alchemy, or they call her Kimmy in the movie. But this was one interesting character. She's really the Ellie Grimbridge of this movie. You know, you don't really trust her from the get-go. And the reason I say Ellie Grimbridge is because from Halloween 3, Stacey Nelkin, there's a point in that movie where she completely turns on Dan Chalice. And you just know that through this movie that Alchemy is going to turn. Because there's a scene in the movie where she's a corpse laying naked on the table and Michael's coming through the room and then all of a sudden he turns around and she's gone. So was that a figment of his imagination, or was she really there? Right away I thought, oh, that's a real person. She's already been, I guess, baked by the Tall Man. And so Tall Man is kind of the Colonel Cochran in this, and he sends her, he even kind of looks like Colonel Cochran, and he sends her to do his dirty work. I knew it all along. But there's a sex scene in this between her and Reggie that's really weird. Like, really weird. I can't even describe it. All I can do is show you. Does that make any sense? And then Alchemy's got this real fetish for bald heads. I don't know if it was his bald head or his skullet. Speaking of sex scenes, there's also a really weird sex scene between Michael and our other female character, Liz. Because they have this kind of Kylo Ren, Rey telepathic thing going throughout the movie. And then it carries over to the sex scene, actually. And if you do some digging behind the scenes, it's really interesting because there was a deleted scene where the sex scene carries over into their imagination, and so they're like having sex on the beach, and then they're having sex in the clouds, and it gets kind of Ron Burgundy.
The most glorious rainbow ever. Tell me on it. Just say the word and...
You know, the scene that's in the movie is weird enough. They're just like looking at each other, and their inner thoughts are talking back and forth, and it's just really strange and weird. Now, let's talk about the kills in this movie, which are completely badass. The ones that really stick out to me are the ones that involve the sphere. There's even like a super sphere or a sphere deluxe or whatever you would call it. But, you know, we have the regular sphere scene where it's coming through the hallway and it hits the guy in the head and then it does its thing. But then there's one that actually goes like in the guy's freaking body, in his stomach, and then comes up and then like goes almost through his mouth. As far as like kills go, they really up the ante in this one. And then you got this really cool looking scene as far as like practical effects go, where this
You play a good game, boy.
like minion of the Tall Man like comes out of this female's back, and it's just like that 80s practical effects goodness that we love to death. And then, of course, the Tall Man. Angus Scrimm loves this freaking role so much. He really owns it in this one. I think even much more than the first movie. It just looks like he had a lot of fun with this one. And then there's a scene where we think, you know, the Tall Man, he's killed because he gets pumped full of this this juice or whatever that's polluted with this acid. And then so it kind of like just melts his body. But then it really gets weird because in the end, he takes the form or comes from alchemy. So you explain that shit to me because I can't. Now, as far as any cons, I would say this one is definitely dated in some scenes. That's really the only con I can give this movie, though. I think it's paced perfectly. I think it's got great kills. I love the characters in this one, like much more than the first movie. So I'm giving this one a high purchase worthy. Cody, you were right. This one is badass, actually, and it's one that I will definitely watch again. So anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on Phantasm II? Let me know in the comments. This one actually has me excited to watch the third one. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and now Stardust. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.